Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Here at MTG times 60, I just go over deck lists, strategy, deck building, fun stuff like that for 60 card Magic. So today we're going to be talking about a deck I call Slow Burn because it burns, but a little slowly, which has some advantages. It's more of a control deck rather than just a burn your opponent in 10 seconds kind of deck. How this was born was how I came up with the idea was a friend asked for a deck based around this card, Spitting Earth, and he wanted it to be under $20. It's like, okay, sounds good. But I really like Planeswalkers, and there's this cool thing about Planeswalkers where they have what's called an ultimate, generally speaking, some ability that costs a lot of loyalty counters, and you often end up sacrificing the Planeswalker to get that ability. And many of them have like really game-winning ultimates. Okay, so the idea of this deck is basically just to control the game, prevent your opponent from really having creatures on the battlefield until you win. That's basically it. So there's a lot of creature removal, a whole lot of creature removal, and then there's also planeswalkers to give you consistent value and ways of generating card advantage. We'll look at that in a little bit. Okay, jumping into the individual cards. Here we have the mana values right here, the mana curve, and obviously starting with 24 mountains. That might seem like a lot, but we're trying to get up to 4 mana planeswalkers very consistently. So we need 24 mountains. Also, it's a budget deck, so we might want to run basic lands, but conveniently we're also taking advantage of that fact with things that count the number of mountains we control. So that's nice. So then Flame Slash, take care of creatures, and Lightning Bolt, take care of creatures, or you can hit your opponent or planeswalkers. Both of those are just classic, a lot of value for the mana. Moving up to two mana, we have Spitting Earth, which deals damage to target creature equal to the number of mountains you control. That's really good for getting rid of big creatures a little bit later in the game when you have a lot of mountains. And your opponent plays some big thing, you're like, oh, for 2 mana, it's dead, right? Very convenient. A Braid can deal with artifacts, or it can just deal 3 damage to creatures, so that is very nice. If you are running into a lot of artifacts, you'd want to just bump that count up to 4, probably. Mizzium Mortars is a great early game and late game card because you can just deal 4 damage to any creature, which will take care of a lot of creatures. But if it's later in the game, you happen to have 6 mana, you can just cast Effort's Overload and deal 4 damage to each creature your opponents control, which is pretty good. So then moving up here to 3 mana, we have Slagstorm, which is really useful for just clearing out a bunch of little creatures, or you can use it to finish off your opponent, because you can deal 3 damage to each creature or to each player. That does deal damage to your own creatures and yourself, so it's generally, it's not something you want to use a lot, which is why it's only 2, but in a pinch, it's really, really helpful, especially like if your creatures have been killed off, you don't have anything to lose anyway, your opponents have, your opponent has several creatures, you can just kill them all, that's very nice. And you can use it to finish off your opponent, which is convenient if they're like having a bunch of creatures preventing you from getting through and they're at 3 life or less, you can just cast that and kill them. Then we get into some really interesting 3-drops. So Bonecrusher Giant, this is an adventure. If you're familiar with adventures, basically you can cast this part first, and then it goes to exile, and then you can cast the creature from exile. So basically, it's 2 spells in 1, which is very nice. So, for example, on turn 2, you can play Stomp and annihilate their creature they played, right? And then on your turn 3, you can play the Bone Crusher Giant, and now you have a 4/3 with some, potentially useful ability. If your opponent tries to target with a spell, it deals 2 damage to that player, right? So that can be useful. Often it's just nice to have a 4/3 creature. This guy can win you some games occasionally, and very frequently he'll just contribute rather well to a win. Hearth Elemental is a very interesting one. So we have Stoke Genius. This is basically a late game card, honestly, to help you not run out of steam. Stoke Genius has you discard your hand and then draw 2 cards. Very importantly, it doesn't matter how many cards you discard, you still draw 2 cards. Many discard draw effects in red. It's like, oh, if you discard 2 cards, draw that many cards, or discard 2 cards and then draw cards equal the number of cards discarded this way, something like that. This one, no. It's just discard your hand, then draw 2 cards. So you use this, obviously, when you don't have anything left in your hand that you want to keep around, right? But it's very helpful at maintaining the flow of removal and pressure. And then this creature, it says it costs 6, but this is one nice thing about Architect, you can set a custom mana value, and I've set it at 3. It's really, you can cast it for as little as a single red, but you should be able to cast it for no more than 3. And it's a 4/5, but it costs less based on the number of instants, sorceries, and creatures with adventures in your graveyard. So that's a very nice creature to have around as well. 2 4-power creatures and play sets of each one of them. That is a pretty good way to have some board state or presence. And if you're clearing out your opponent's creatures every turn, then those can swing in oftentimes unblocked. Other times they just serve as really nice blockers to protect your planeswalkers. Okay, now we'll get into the Planeswalker package. We have 3 different ones. Koth, Fire Resistance. He starts out at 4, and you can +2 to get a mountain, like search up a mountain. We're not playing it for that reason, right? It can be nice. It does help you not run out of mountains to play, and it can be nice to have more mountains for cards like Spitting Earth and just also for being able to play spells. However, wouldn't be worth it for that alone. He does have a -3 though, where he deals damage to target creature equal to the number of mountains you control. That's just like Spitting Earth, and that's pretty good. We want to be able to remove our opponent's creatures. So those 2 abilities are pretty nice. If it weren't for the removal ability, we wouldn't be playing him, but he's a really good removal spell. And then if you happen to be able to get the emblem, which takes about 3 turns, if you just +2, +2, and then -7, then you have an emblem. And whenever a mountain enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 4 damage to any target. The emblem does. And that's really pretty nice because with 24 mountains late game, you are going to be drawing mountains and not really having a use for them. So that gives you a use for it, right? Still, we only have 2 because it's just not, not something you want to see all the time. Jaya, Fiery Negotiator, is another Planeswalker. Starts at 4 again, and she has a number of abilities. The emblem on her is a little harder to get. It takes 5 turns to get the emblem if you just +1, +1, +1, +1, -8, right? And honestly, we're a little less set on getting her emblem. But she will give you creatures. She'll give you creatures that will either block or attack, which is really nice. either one of those. They have prowess, so that means they get +1/+1 whenever you cast a non-creature spell, until end of turn, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell. So we can hypothetically make them a little bigger. Also, they just are really good chump blockers to protect your planeswalkers. However, her -1 ability is really good for us, especially mid to late game when we're kind of running out of cards and we want to maintain the flow. She will exile the top 2 cards of your library, and then you choose one of them to play that turn. Right? And obviously you still have to pay the costs and whatnot, but that's very, very good because you get to choose, one of 2 cards, and just cast it, or sorry, play it. So you can play mountains off of that, though you likely won't if there's some other option. And then she does have a -2, which can deal some damage, so it's based on you having creatures. So that does come up a little less often, but she can still act as removal. And her minus ability, or her ultimate, is an emblem that copies any instant or sorcery you cast twice. All of your instant sorceries are red, and they have to be red, so that's cool. That is pretty good. So if you have that out, and then you play Slagstorm, you can deal 9 damage to your opponent. That's pretty cool. Or you can take out 3 different creatures of Spitting Earth, or just lightning bolt them for 9, or whatever it is, right? So that's pretty good. Though that, like I said, is not the principal reason why we play her. Alrighty, Chandra, Torch of Defiance. This is an absolute powerhouse. Okay, by far the best planeswalker that we have here. So it starts out at 4, but she has 2 different plus abilities that are very, very important to our deck. Okay, and one of them is you exile the top card, and you can cast that card. If you don't, it deals 2 damage to your opponent, right? So, important note, you are casting that card as part of the resolution of this ability. So you can't just play it later that turn, okay? But what's really nice is that if you hit a mountain that you can't cast, obviously, because you don't cast lands, or if you just hit something that you don't want to cast for whatever reason, or can't cast, like you don't have the mana for it or whatever, you still get value because she's still dealing 2 damage to each opponent. That's very nice. Just getting more cards, though, is amazing. And then she does have the ability to give you red, which is very useful, especially mid-game. Late game, you generally just have enough mana that doesn't come up. But a pretty common play pattern that I've noticed is playing her on turn 4, and then doing the +1 to add red, and using Spitting Earth or Braid or Stomp or Lightning Bolt or Flame Slash to deal with any creature that your opponents have that might attack her on your opponent's turn. So that's a pretty good little ability there. And then of course, the next turn should just can give you a card or 2 mana. And for example, you could overload Mizzium Mortars on the next turn. Okay. The -3 though is going to just deal 4 damage to target creature. Another really good way of just getting rid of a creature, so that it doesn't attack her or doesn't cause problems, whatever. Clear out blockers, just great. And then her -7 is you get an emblem with whenever you cast a spell, this emblem deals 5 damage to any target. That is a really good way to win the game. So you can just play her, and then for 3 turns, you use her plus abilities that help you, get rid of all your opponent's creatures, help you just stay alive and keep her protected. And then the next turn, you get the emblem. And pretty much, unless you're essentially dead already, you win. Unless you get really unlucky with your draws. But you just have to cast a few spells. Even if you haven't done any damage already to your opponent, all you do is cast a few spells. Whether that's with a Planeswalker or like Bone Crusher Giant, for example, you can cast Stomp and then Bone Crusher Giant. That's 2 spells right there. That would deal 10 damage just from the emblem. And if you target them with the Stomp, then you dealt them 12 damage. So you can deal a lot of damage really fast. You can even, if you're really desperate, you can even target your own creature with a Spitting Earth. To like, if they don't have any creatures you can target your own creature with Spitting Earth and deal them 5 damage from the emblem. It's a really good way to win very quickly. So that's basically it. Over here we just have the tokens and emblems, just to keep track of, to keep track of where we are in the game that way. So anyways, that is basically the deck list in the mana curve. We have a somewhat high mana curve, honestly, with 9 4-mana planeswalkers, but you just have a lot of removal that keeps you in the game. So I think it works out pretty well. You do need a lot of lands for that. Okay, and then just to show you a little bit about what kinds of stuff we have going on here in a visual kind of way. We have a lot of burn, we have a lot of creatures. These I count Jaya as a creature here because she can give us creatures. So I have like 11 creatures, not tons, honestly. 11 ways of getting more cards, so we just don't run out of removal. Ramp, we have a little bit. That's really not a super high priority most of the time, but it is nice. And then removal. And these are, of course, double counting, some of these planeswalkers especially. Then we have removal, just a lot of removal. And that's how you play the game. Now, will it make your opponents love you? I don't know. I can't really guarantee that they will enjoy having all their creatures burned. It's kind of a toss up whether they enjoy that or not, but you should have a great time. All right, let's head to the playtester, see how it goes. Okay, we're going to mulligan. No, never mind. We're good. We have turn 2, turn 3, and then a really good turn 4. We'll keep it, even though it has 4 lands. Okay, so turn 1, we'll just play a mountain. Turn 2, oh wow, we got the dream team here. So we're going to play that mountain, and we'll play Stomp, getting rid of their turn 1 play. This obviously assumes that you're playing against a creature deck, which might or might not be the case. Okay, we'll cast Bone Crusher Giant, and then see what we get. Okay, if you're playing against a combo deck that doesn't care about creatures, has no creatures, you're probably not going to do well, honestly. But most casual decks use a decent number of creatures, so I feel like in most cases you'll be just fine. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to use our plus ability to exile a card. We can't cast it because we have no mana, so we'll just deal 2 damage to the opponent. Okay, and then turn 5. Here we can probably just start with doing the plus to exile a card. So we're going to exile. Oh, we can't cast a mountain, so we'll just deal 2 damage. I like to do that at the beginning just so I know what I'm working with. I still have plenty of mountains available. Plenty of mana available. And then we'll probably just play Jaya Fiery Negotiator and bump her up to create a monk. And basically, I might have attacked with Bone Crusher Giant on turn 4 if I hadn't been playing a Chandra. But I'm guessing, I would want to keep up as a blocker most likely, right? Like in a playtest environment, I just try to play a little safe, not pretend like my opponent isn't doing anything. And we'll just use Lightning Bolt on whatever else they've cast. And then next turn, we'll, like I said, I like to be a little realistic with my playtesting, just to see if my deck's actually going to perform halfway decently. And so I'm going to let my monk die as a chump blocker. But now we have some other options. I'm going to, again, bump her up. See how this actually is fairly reasonable to get her up to the emblem level. So we'll exile that. Slagstorm. Slagstorm would be an interesting one. Basically, this would highly depend on what my board state was actually like. If I still had Bone Crusher Giant, and my opponent didn't have any creatures, I would obviously not cast it. If, on the other hand, my Bone Crusher Giant has had to chump block, and my opponent did have, a creature or two left over, especially one that I couldn't deal with an Abrade, I could totally see myself casting Slagstorm. Like, say if they cast 3 creatures. So I'll just pretend that happened. And I will cast Slagstorm. Okay, killing Bone Crusher Giant if it's still around, or if it wasn't, it's hiding in the graveyard. So I'll just do that. One nice thing about having Planeswalkers is you can just kill all the creatures and you still have stuff. So then we can +1 and make a monk. So now we have a creature, our opponents don't. That's a decent spot. And I mean, just for good measure, we can use a braid on anything that your opponent has, whether it's an artifact or a creature that had toughness greater than 3, so it wasn't killed by the Slagstorm, right? And then next turn, see, now we could bump her up to get another card, but in this case, with Chandra, I feel like in most cases you should just get the emblem as fast as possible. Not every case, but definitely if you can win pretty quickly with the emblem, I would do that. So right now, for example, I have 1 Jaya. So I'm going to actually use her -2 ability. Oh, sorry, -1 ability here. And exile 2 cards. I'm going to let that one stay in exile. And then I'm going to Flame Slash whatever creature my opponent played. And then I'm just going to play a Kothfire Resistance. And I would obviously use the -1. Sorry, -3. But I could just use the +2. Also, I did miss when I played Flame Slash. Chandra emblem dealt 5 damage. Okay, so then when I play Koth, then another 5 damage. So see how that emblem pretty much takes care of the game after you get it out. So we can just go and search for a mountain. Well, there are plenty of mountains. We're going to move this to hand. And then play it. Don't really have anything to use it on right now, but okay. Then we'll go to the next turn. So right here is actually a time where using Hearth Elemental would be a smart idea. At this point, I can even just use Hearth Elemental and this emblem to win the game. I don't need anything else. I can cast that for the Stoke Genius, discarding Jaya, drawing 2, and then I can just play Mountain, because why not? But if we look at a graveyard, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that Hearth Elemental cares about. So you can either win by, okay, so when you cast Dark Genius, deals 5 damage. Now we have basically two options for how to win with that emblem. You can either win with the Chandra Torture Defiance emblem by casting Chandra Torture Defiance, or you could just pay a single mana for Hearth Elemental. We'll do that. 4/5 for a single mana. And that is going to finish off your opponent with an emblem. I mean, even if we somehow didn't have that, like, we have a pretty good amount of stuff to do now. Like, we could get another Chandra, for example, +1 to exile a card and deal 2 damage. Like, there's stuff. We're not running out of cards. We're not running out of things to do. We haven't even used these abilities yet this turn. This deck has a lot of stuff to keep providing value throughout the game. Okay, and that just wraps it up. That honestly felt like a fairly typical playtesting experience. I've done several rounds of playtesting, and it seems to play out somewhat similarly each time, just with different options. We didn't see Elysium Mortars, but you'll see various ways of just getting rid of your opponent's creatures. The goal, like I said, is to just do that every single turn. Just don't let your opponents have any creatures, and then eventually win. It's not the fastest kind of win. Often you're winning around, turn 7 to 10. But I think it's pretty effective at getting there. And I honestly think it's a ton of fun because Planeswalkers are a blast, right? And it takes a little bit of a slower deck, a little bit more of a control type deck to actually use the Planeswalkers to their maximum abilities. I think this deck really does that, and I think winning with emblems is a really fun way to go, honestly. So, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoy playing the deck. If you try it out, definitely let me know. If you do, let me know how it goes, your games and all that. And I'll put the link to this deck list in the description below, so you can check out the deck list directly on Architect that way. If you enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button for more videos as they come out. I'll be doing a whole series on Epic on a Budget decks. So anyways, look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good one. Ciao.